Hello students and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about interpreting emotion. Before we begin today, I would like for you to consider the following questions. Does physiological arousal always precede emotional experience? Do we get a sense in our body before we have an emotion? Are different emotions marked by distinct physiological responses? And what is the connection between what we think and how we feel? The James Lange theory. According to this theory, witnessing an external stimulus leads to a physiological response. Your emotional reaction depends on how you interpret those physical reactions. For example, suppose you see a spider, there's the stimulus. You begin to shake, so shaking here is arousal in the sympathetic nervous system, which then you interpret the shaking as fear. This is appraisal. So another way of thinking about this is suppose you're walking in the woods and you see a grizzly bear. You begin to tremble and your heart begins to race. The James Lange theory proposes that you will interpret your physical reaction and conclude that you are frightened. I am trembling, therefore I am frightened. William James explained, "My thesis, on the contrary, is that the bodily changes follow directly the perception of the exciting fact, and that our feeling of the same changes as they occur is the emotion." For another example, imagine that you're walking through a dark parking garage towards your car. You notice a dark figure trailing behind you, and your heart begins to race. According to the James Lange theory, you then interpret your physical reactions to the stimulus as fear. Therefore, you feel frightened and rush to your car as quickly as you can. Both James and Lange believed that while it was possible to imagine experiencing an emotion such as fear or anger, your imagined version of the emotion would be a flat facsimile of the real feeling. Why? Because they felt that without the actual physiological response that they believed precipitated the emotions, it would be impossible to experience these emotions on demand. In other words, the physical reaction needs to be present in order to actually experience real emotion. The Cannon-Bard theory of emotion, aka the spider makes me shake and feel afraid. The Cannon-Bard theory of emotion, also known as the thalamic theory of emotion, is a physiological explanation of emotion developed by Walter Cannon and Philip Bard. Cannon-Bard theory states that we feel emotions and experience physiological reactions such as sweating, trembling, and muscle tension simultaneously. More specifically, it is suggested that emotions result when the thalamus sends a message to the brain in response to a stimulus, resulting in a physiological reaction. The person sees a spider, that's the stimulus, and simultaneously they begin to shake and interpret the shaking as fear, which leads to the experience of fear. According to the Cannon-Bard theory of emotion, we react to a stimulus and experience the associated emotion at the same time. The physical reactions are not dependent upon the emotional reaction or vice versa. When an event occurs, the thalamus transmits a signal to the amygdala. The amygdala is an oval-shaped structure in the brain that plays an important role in emotional processing, including emotions such as fear and anger. The thalamus also sends signals to the autonomic nervous system, resulting in the physical reactions such as muscle tension, shaking, and sweating. Another theory of emotion is the SCHACHTER-SINGER two-factor theory of emotion. This is known as, I label my shaking as fear because I appraise the situation as dangerous. What exactly makes up an emotion? There are two key components, physical arousal and a cognitive label. In other words, the experience of emotion involves first having some kind of physiological response, which the mind then identifies. Cognitive theories of emotion began to emerge during the 1960s as part of what is often referred to as the cognitive revolution in psychology. What is the two-factor theory? Like the James Lange theory of emotion, and in contrast to the Cannon-Bard theory of emotion, Schachter and Singer felt that physical arousal played a primary role in emotions. However, they suggested that this arousal was made for a wide variety of emotions, so physical arousal alone could not be responsible for emotional responses. The two-factor theory of emotion focuses on the interaction between physical arousal and how we cognitively label that arousal. In other words, simply feeling arousal is not enough. We must also identify the arousal in order to feel the emotion. In the spider example, you see a spider, you begin to shake, you decide the situation you're in is dangerous, then you experience fear. In 1962, Schachter and Singer put their theory to the test. They had a group of 184 male participants injected with epinephrine, a hormone that produces arousal, including increased heartbeat, trembling, and rapid breathing. All of the participants were told that they were being injected with a new drug to test their eyesight. However, one group of participants was informed of the possible side effects that the injection might cause, while the other group of participants was not. Participants were then placed in a room with another participant who was actually a Confederate in the experiment, meaning they were in on the experiment. The Confederate either acted in one of two ways: euphoric or angry. Participants who had not been informed about the effects of the injection were more likely to feel either happier or angrier than those who had been informed. Those who were in a room with a euphoric Confederate were more likely to interpret the side effects of the drug, such as happiness, while those exposed to the angry Confederate were more likely to interpret their feelings as anger. Schachter and Singer had hypothesized that if people experienced an emotion for which they had no explanation, they would then label these feelings using their feelings at the moment. The results of the experiment suggested that participants who had no explanation for their feelings were more likely to be susceptible to the emotional experiences of the Confederate. This is known as the spillover effect, the tendency of one person's emotions to affect how other people around them feel. Put another way, the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory suggests that emotions do not exist until we add a label to whatever body sensations we're feeling. So I face a stranger and my heart is pounding. Is it fear, excitement, anger, lust, or did I have too much caffeine? So the label completes the emotion. Another way of thinking about how appraisal affects our emotions. So Stanley Schachter and Jerome Singer highlighted the role of appraisal in labeling consciously experienced emotions. So you have a kind of a nice little diagram there. So Richard Lazarus, on the other hand, noted that even in emotional responses that operate without conscious thought, top-down cognitive functions such as appraisal of a stimuli can be involved. The Lazarus-LEDOUX theory of emotion. The theory works like this. Some of our emotional reactions, especially fears and dislikes, develop in a low road through the brain, skipping conscious thought. In one study, people showed an amygdala response to certain images without being aware of the image of their reaction. So if you want to look at the high road, low road theories, looking at figure A here, the low road is a speedier emotional processing. So basically we see a fearful stimulus, it goes to the thalamus and it goes directly to the amygdala and we immediately process the emotion. For other types of emotion, the stimulus is taken in by the eyes, it goes to the thalamus, but instead of going directly to the amygdala, it then is processed in the sensory cortex of the cerebral cortex. It goes to the prefrontal cortex for us to make a judgment. Then it goes to the amygdala. So there's a slight delay between stimulus and response. Let's test this now. Was your reaction a little slower? In figure A, you probably saw the snake immediately or very quickly. That's because the fearful stimulus went directly to the amygdala. It took the low road. Whereas in the second image, where it's in black and white, you need a little bit more time to process. So there's a slight delay between when you see the stimulus and you experiencing the emotion. This time we're going to spot the flower. Did this one take a little bit longer for you? That's because you're using the high road, because you have too many competing snake stimuli, and we don't tend to see flowers as threatening. Let's try again. Did this one take even longer? Emotional detection and context clues. So what emotions do you see below? You can tell what emotions he's feeling because the faces are exactly the same. Our detection of emotion must be based on context, the situation, and gestures. So we have a disgusted look, a sad look, and an angry look, but it's all the same facial expression. It depends on the surrounding information. Detecting lies and fakes. Polygraphs, which detect physiological arousal, fail sometimes at correctly identifying when people are lying. There are some visible signs of lying. For example, eye blinks decrease and other facial movements change. In which image is Paul Ekman lying with a fake smile? So a real smile uses involuntary muscles around the eyes. You get little crinkles around the eyes, and that's hard to fake. And then we have an image up here of what's going on in the brain in an fMRI when a person is lying. So there's activity in the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex as well. Interpreting anger. We are primed to quickly detect negative emotions. So people more speedily detect an angry face than a happy one. Detecting emotions in others. People read a great deal of emotional content in the eyes, which are the windows to the soul, and the face. Those who have been abused are biased towards seeing fearful faces as angry. Introverts are better at detecting emotions, and extroverts have emotions that are easier to read. So basically, I just want you to look at this image that we're about to see. Although we're not going to raise our hand, I want you to see if you can detect when you first see anger under the red box. Catharsis is the idea that releasing aggressive energy through fantasy or action relieves aggressive urges. This is a Freudian concept. Yes, it does, but it only works temporarily. In the long run, catharsis rarely works. So catharsis may actually lead to more aggression in the future and is also habit forming. So you're more likely to repeat what you did to release anger in the past. The catharsis myth refers to the idea that we can reduce anger by releasing it. And we do this by acting aggressively, yelling, punching a pillow. In most cases, expressing anger worsens it, and any release reinforces the aggression, making it a conditioned habit. Sometimes releasing anger causes harm and results in guilt. Instead, try calming down and moving on. A closer look at anger. So a flash of anger gives us energy and initiative to fight or otherwise take action when necessary. Persistent anger can cause more harm than whatever we're angry about. And some ways to keep anger from persisting is distraction, constructive action, problem solving, exercise, verbal expression, and allowing others to be wrong. A closer look at happiness. There are behaviors that seem to go with happiness. Researchers have found that happy people tend to have higher self-esteem, be optimistic, have close friends and a satisfying marriage, have work and leisure that engage their skills, they sleep well and exercise, and because they are feeling good, they tend to be more willing to help others, which we're going to watch a video about now. Happiness seems not much related to other factors such as age, gender, parenthood, or physical attractiveness. There also may be a genetic basis for a predisposition to happiness. Whether because of genes, culture, or personal history, we each seem to develop a mood set point or a level of happiness to which we keep returning. We're going to watch a short video about this now. Emotional adaptation and comparison. The adaptation level phenomenon is the human tendency to adapt to a stimuli while expecting future stimuli to be the same. So, for example, we tend to think that if we just got the new thing, the new car, the new outfit, the new phone, that we would be happy. That's all it would take is just that one thing. What tends to happen is we adapt to the novelty, or the novelty of that stimulus wears off, and then we go back to our original emotional mood set point. We're going to watch a short video about this now. It's a really interesting one, especially when you talk about people who have won the lottery. Relative deprivation. We tend to compare ourselves to those who are at or above our level for happiness, income, whatever, and believe we are worse off than them. Why do you ask people how they did on a quiz or on a test? You don't really care how they did. You just want to know how you did in comparison. Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is our ability to perceive, use, understand, and manage emotions. Emotional intelligence is our ability to perceive, use, understand, and manage emotions. Physiological measures of empathy show a much smaller gap between males and females, such as heart rate when seeing someone in distress. However, women are much more likely to express empathy. Sympathy, or fellow feeling, or community of feeling, is a feeling of care and concern for someone, often someone close, accompanied by a wish to see him better off or better. Compared to pity, sympathy implies a greater sense of shared similarities together with a more profound personal engagement. However, sympathy, unlike empathy, does not involve a shared perspective or shared emotions. And while the facial expressions of sympathy do convey caring and concern, they do not convey shared distress. Sympathy and empathy often lead to each other, but not always. For instance, it is possible to sympathize with such things as hedgehogs and ladybirds, but not, strictly speaking, to empathize with them. Conversely, psychopaths with absolutely no sympathy for the victims can nonetheless make use of empathy to snare or torture them. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have for you today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a fantastic day.